The air in the grand conclave of the Galactic Compact was a solid thing, heavy with the pressure of unspoken dread and the shimmering, silent energies of 1,000 worlds. It hung thick and suffocating around the Pillar of Dominion, the obsidian spire that served as the Cathar Imperium's seat. High Lord Valerius stood before it, his 4 powerful arms crossed over the ceremonial plates of his chest armor, his mandibles tight with a fury that seemed to make the very air around him vibrate. The chamber itself was a testament to the Compact's age and power, a cavernous sphere carved from a moonlet, its walls inlaid with star lanes of pure light that pulsed with the data of a faltering galaxy. Representatives from every core species were present, their forms casting long, distorted shadows in the ethereal glow of the central lumen crystal. But all eyes, all thoughts, all fears were fixed on the silent, empty dais designated for the newcomers, the humans. "They mock us," Valerius's voice was a low growl, a sound of grinding rock that carried across the vast, silent hall. "They sow chaos and discord, they sever the ancient arteries of commerce and communication that have bound this galaxy for millennia, and they do not even show their faces. This is not the act of a fledgling race stumbling into the galactic theater. This is an attack. A silent, insidious invasion that has done more damage in a single cycle than our fleets have in 1,000 years of open war." He gestured with one powerful arm to the holographic display that shimmered in the center of the chamber. It was a terrifying sight. A map of the known galaxy, once a vibrant tapestry of stable trade routes and established spheres of influence, was now a fractured, bleeding mess. Sectors were winking out, their data streams going dark. Entire star systems, once loyal vassals of the great empires, were declaring independence, their economies suddenly and inexplicably self-sufficient. The Scythian hive, a pragmatic insectoid race whose entire civilization was built on interstellar logistics, was in a state of near collapse, their carefully constructed supply chains dissolving into anarchy. The Cathar Imperium itself was hemorrhaging control, its iron grip on its tributary worlds slipping as if through sand. And it was all happening without a single shot being fired. No fleets clashed in the void. No armies marched on planets. There was only a creeping, pervasive silence, a great unraveling that seemed to originate from the direction of the Sol system. From across the chamber, a soft, chiming resonance answered. It came from the floating crystalline form of Elder Kalis, the representative of the Lumen, a species of pure thought inhabiting geometric energy lattices. Their forms pulsed with gentle internal light and their voices were music. "An attack presumes intent, High Lord. We have analyzed trillions of data streams. There is no hostile code, no virus, no psionic compulsion. The systems are not failing, they are being abandoned. The people are not rebelling in the traditional sense. They are simply choosing another path." Valerius turned his massive head, his multifaceted eyes narrowing. "Another path? They are choosing chaos. They are severing themselves from the order and stability the Compact provides. And this choice only became available when the humans began their expansion. It is their weapon, Elder. A weapon we do not yet understand, and that is the most dangerous kind." A clicking, chittering voice joined the debate. Ambassador Calyx of the Scythian hive, her slender carapace twitching with anxiety, stood from her recessed alcove. "The High Lord speaks with aggression, but his core assessment is not wrong. Our hives starve. Our distribution nodes are being bypassed by a new phantom network that we cannot track, cannot regulate, and cannot compete with. It is decentralized, impossibly efficient, and it spreads like a contagion of thought. Entire colonies have disconnected from the hive consciousness, not through force, but because this new human-derived system offers them greater sustenance with less effort. It is a biological imperative to follow it. We are being dismantled by a superior logistical model. To a Scythian, this is the very definition of warfare." The chamber murmured with 100 different sounds of assent and fear. This was the heart of their terror. It was not a war of ships and plasma, but a war of systems, of ideas. The humans, this young, volatile species from a forgotten fringe world, had unleashed something that defied all known doctrines of galactic conflict. They had been members of the Compact for less than a standard century, a blink of an eye to the Lumen, and had been largely dismissed as primitive, if ambitious. Their technology was seen as brutish and inelegant, their social structures chaotic, their philosophy a jumble of contradictory ideals. They were emotional, unpredictable, and prone to internal conflict. The Compact had underestimated them, viewing them as a minor power to be contained and eventually absorbed. Now it was clear that underestimation had been a catastrophic error. The galaxy was falling apart not because of a human fleet, but because of its absence. For weeks, every sensor array, every deep space observatory had been watching the Sol system, expecting the emergence of a grand armada. The Cathar had mobilized their own fleets, their warships like cities of jagged metal, ready for a confrontation that would reaffirm their dominance. But the human fleets never came. Their military worlds were quiet. Their shipyards were active, but whatever they were building, it was not being deployed into compact space. The great human military, the one they had boasted of in their initial diplomatic overtures, the one that had supposedly pacified their own turbulent region of space, was nowhere to be seen. This absence was more terrifying than any invasion. It implied a confidence, a level of strategic depth that was utterly alien. To cripple the entire galactic infrastructure without deploying a single military asset was the work of either gods or monsters. The Cathar, in their rigid honor-bound warrior culture, could not comprehend it. To them, power was expressed through force, through the glorious clash of fleets and the subjugation of worlds. This human strategy was dishonorable. It was cowardly. And it was terrifyingly effective. They hide behind their mysterious network, letting it do their work for them, Valerius continued, his voice resonating with contempt. They are parasites, not warriors. We must force them into the open. I have proposed a punitive expedition to their home system, a demonstration of true power. We will burn their worlds and salt their space until they learn the price of defying the established order. We will remind them what a real fleet can do. And what if this is what they desire? Elder Kalis chimed, its light pulsing with a soft, cautionary yellow. What if they wish for you to gather your fleets and strike at their heart? You would be moving your most powerful assets into a single, predictable vector, an action they can anticipate, an action they may have prepared for. There is a pattern here we are not seeing. The absence of their fleet is a deliberate statement. It is a piece of the puzzle, not a sign of inaction. The elder's logic was sound, and it chilled the assembled representatives more than Valerius's bluster. The Lumen were ancient. They had witnessed the rise and fall of countless empires. They saw time not as a line, but as a great, intricate weave, and they were masters of discerning its patterns. For them to confess that they could not fully grasp the human design was a terrifying admission. Then what is your counsel, Elder? Valerius sneered. That we sit here in this chamber and watch our civilizations crumble around us. That we wait until this human idea has consumed everything we have built. My counsel, Kalis replied, its tone serene yet firm, is to do what we should have done from the beginning. We must listen. We have broadcast summons, demands, threats. We have not in all this time sent a simple invitation to talk. We have not asked them to explain. We have only accused. A wave of dissent washed through the hall. Talk to them. Now, from a position of weakness with their empires in disarray. It was unthinkable to the proud warrior races. It was illogical to the pragmatic ones who saw no bargaining chip left to play. They will see it as a sign of surrender, Valerius boomed. The Cathar do not beg for answers from upstarts who fight in shadows. Before Kalis could respond, a new light blossomed in the center of the chamber. It was not part of the standard holographic display. It was a sharp, clear, and uninvited signal. A proximity alert. The Conclave's formidable defenses, shields that could repel a supernova, had been bypassed. Not broken, not forced, but simply sidestepped, as if a door had been opened with a key no one knew existed. A collective gasp, 1,000 different expressions of shock, echoed in the hall. On the display, a single vessel was depicted, holding a stationary orbit just beyond the moonlet's shielded perimeter. It was small, impossibly so. It was sleek, unarmed, a sliver of polished obsidian and soft, internal light. It bore no resemblance to the blocky, functional warships of the Cathar or the crystalline dreadnoughts of the Lumen. It was a vessel of profound and understated elegance. And its energy signature was quintessentially, unmistakably human. A communication request followed, not broadcast on the emergency frequencies, but inserted directly into the Conclave's private, encrypted network. The intrusion was so clean, so effortless, it was as if they had always possessed the clearance codes. For a long moment, the chamber was frozen in absolute silence. The weight of the unknown pressed down on them. They had been expecting an armada. They had prepared for a war of attrition. Instead, they were faced with a single, silent ship that had slipped through the heart of their defenses as if they were nothing. High Lord Valerius's mandibles worked, a tremor of something other than rage passing through his massive frame. It was the cold touch of uncertainty. He looked to Elder Kalis, whose crystalline form was now pulsing with an intense, analytical blue. The ancient being had been right. This was not a war they understood. With a slow, heavy sense of inevitability, Valerius gave a curt nod to the communications officer. "Open the channel," he commanded, his voice a low thunderclap in the sudden, profound quiet. "Let us finally hear what these ghosts have to say." The image of the galactic map dissolved, replaced by a life-sized hologram of the vessel's interior. It was as minimalist and elegant as the ship's exterior. There was no bridge crowded with crew, no command throne, no flashing consoles. There was only a single figure, a human woman, standing in a room of soft, gray light. She was dressed in a simple, dark blue uniform, devoid of rank or insignia. Her hair was pulled back from a face that was calm, composed, and unreadable. Her eyes, a deep, startling gray, seemed to look at each and every representative in the chamber at once, holding their gaze without aggression, without fear, without any discernible emotion at all. "I am Ambassador Eva Rostova of the Terran Confederacy," she said, her voice clear and measured, translated instantly and perfectly into the native tongue of every species present. The translation was flawless, capturing not just the words but the subtle, serene cadence of her speech. "I have come in response to your concerns." The sheer audacity of her arrival, the calm professionalism in the face of a galaxy in chaos, was a spectacle of power far greater than any fleet Valerius could have imagined. He felt a deep, instinctual part of his warrior mind recoil. This was not an enemy he knew how to fight. He stepped forward, his armored feet clanging on the floor, trying to reclaim the sense of dominance that was rapidly slipping away. "You have come in response to our concerns," he roared, letting his voice fill the chamber. "Your race has single-handedly plunged this galaxy into ruin. You have dismantled empires, shattered alliances, and brought starvation and anarchy to countless worlds. And you send one unarmed ship and a single diplomat. This is the height of arrogance. This is an insult to every being in this conclave." Ambassador Rostova remained perfectly still, her expression unchanging. She listened to his tirade with a patience that was almost unnerving, as if hearing the predictable outburst of a child. When he was finished, a profound silence once again descended, broken only by the soft hum of the chamber's life support. Then she spoke, her voice never rising, yet carrying an authority that dwarfed Valerius's rage. "We have dismantled nothing, High Lord. We have offered a better alternative. The systems of the Galactic Compact were old, centralized, and inefficient. They created dependencies that you leveraged for control. They created choke points that you used to enforce loyalty. This was not stability. It was a carefully managed stagnation. What you call chaos is the sound of 1,000 worlds breathing free for the first time." The statement was so direct, so utterly devoid of diplomatic subtlety, that it struck the conclave dumb. She was not denying their accusations. She was confirming them and reframing them as a virtue. Elder Kalus's light pulsed gently. "You speak of freedom, Ambassador, yet the result has been the collapse of the very structures that prevent widespread conflict. You have created a power vacuum. Such things are inevitably filled with violence." "Only when power is seen as a finite resource to be hoarded," Rostova replied, turning her calm gaze to the lumen. "The network we introduced, what your analysts are calling the Phantom Network and your people are calling the Weaver Net, is not a weapon. It is a tool. It is a hyperdimensional FTL communication and logistics web. It does not require massive, centralized hubs. Every user is a node. Every ship, every colony, every individual can connect directly to any other. It is faster, more secure, and uses a fraction of the energy of the old Stargate network." She paused, letting the technical implications sink in. The Scythian ambassador, Kalix, began to chitter softly, a sound of dawning, horrified comprehension. A decentralized FTL network, the processing power required would be astronomical. The quantum physics involved were beyond anything the Compact had ever theorized. "We did not force it upon anyone," Rostova continued. "We simply made the core code open source and released it. We gave it away. The choice to adopt it was made freely by trillions of individuals, corporations, and colonies who found it superior to the system you imposed upon them. The Cathar Empire did not fall to a human fleet, High Lord. It was made obsolete by a better idea." Valerius felt a surge of pure, unadulterated fury. Obsolete. His empire, forged in 10,000 years of glorious conquest and honorable combat, was being dismissed as an outdated piece of technology. "An idea?" he spat. "You have destroyed us with an idea." "We have not destroyed you," Rostova corrected him, her voice still impossibly calm. "Your power was derived from your control over interstellar travel and communication. You held the keys to the kingdom. We simply taught everyone how to build their own doors. They are no longer dependent on you. If your empire cannot offer its subjects something more than control, then it does not deserve to be an empire. The brutal, unassailable logic of her words was more devastating than any plasma volley. She was right. The Cathar, the Scythians, even the more subtle powers had built their strength on being indispensable middlemen. The Weavernet had rendered them all redundant. The chaos they were seeing was not the result of an attack, but of the galaxy itself reorganizing along more efficient lines, casting off the parasitic hierarchies of the past. Ambassador Kalix stepped forward, her antennae trembling. But the cost, the transition, our hives are not structured for such independence. We are a collective. This individualism you have unleashed is tearing us apart. Growth is often painful, Rostova acknowledged, a flicker of something akin to empathy in her eyes. Your people are not being torn apart, they are evolving. For the first time, individual Scythian colonies can trade directly with one another, tailoring their production to their own needs rather than the rigid quotas of the central hive consciousness. They are forming smaller, more dynamic collectives. They are adapting. Life, Ambassador, finds a way. This was the core of the human philosophy, the Conclave realized. It was a terrifyingly radical concept, that the individual, not the state or the empire, was the most important unit. That system should serve people, not the other way around. It was the antithesis of everything the ancient powers of the galaxy had built. Elder Kalis, who had remained silent, now pulsed with a profound, inquiring light. This was all foreseen, was it not, Ambassador? You knew this would happen. You modeled the socio-economic collapse of our institutions with precision. This was a deliberate act of galactic re-engineering. Rostova met the ancient being's unspoken question with a slow, deliberate nod. Yes, we knew this would be the result. The disruption was calculated. It was deemed a necessary, if regrettable, consequence. The admission hung in the air, cold and heavy. This wasn't an accident, it was a plan. Necessary? Valerius's voice was low, shaking with a rage that had now turned to a cold, deep dread. Necessary for what? For your own ascension, to clear the board so that humanity can take control. Control is not our goal, High Lord, Rostova said, and for the first time a shadow of something vast and somber touched her features. Survival is. She gestured, and the holographic display behind her shifted. The simple gray room was replaced by a view from her ship. It showed the conclave moonlit, the glittering dust of the nebula beyond, and then it zoomed out and out and out. It pulled back past the familiar arms of their galaxy, past the swirling clouds of gas and dust, until their entire galactic disk was a beautiful, spinning jewel in an infinite, terrifying blackness. The scale was humbling, designed to make them all feel infinitesimally small. You have spent millennia, Rostova said, her voice a soft echo in the vastness, squabbling over these stars. You have fought wars for control of systems, of sectors, of trade routes. You built empires of dust, all while ignoring the ocean of night that surrounds you. The view continued to pull back, showing the faint smudges of other, impossibly distant galaxies. The void between them was absolute, a darkness so profound it seemed to have a physical presence. You have wondered, she continued, her voice drawing all of them into a state of rapt attention, why you have not seen the human fleet. You have assumed we were holding it in reserve, a hidden dagger to strike at the heart of the compact. The title of your emergency session, we have noted, speculates on the chaos we have caused while our main fleet has not even been deployed. Her lips curved in a faint, mirthless smile. You are correct. It has not, but not for the reasons you believe. The display shifted again. It now showed a region of space on the absolute outer rim of the galaxy, a place where the stars grew thin and the great dark began. And there, assembled in silent, breathtaking formation, was the human fleet. It was a sight that defied every known principle of naval design and strategic doctrine. It was not a fleet of warships. There were vessels that were clearly military, colossal dreadnoughts that dwarfed even the Har's largest command carriers, their hulls forged from a dark, non-reflective material that seemed to drink the light of nearby stars. But they were a minority. The bulk of the fleet was composed of other ships. There were vast factory vessels, their sides open to the void as they assembled incomprehensible structures. There were science cruisers bristling with sensor arrays that pulsed with quiet, focused energy. There were mobile habitats, entire ecosystems encased in shimmering domes of light, larger than most of the moons in the Conclave's home system. And there were others, ships of bizarre and esoteric design whose purpose was impossible to guess. It was not a fleet built for conquest. It was a fleet built to build, to explore, to withstand. And they were all facing outward, away from the galaxy. For 50 years, Rostova explained, her voice now imbued with a deep and solemn gravity. Since the moment we developed deep void listening arrays capable of peering into the intergalactic medium, we have been watching. We have been listening. We believed we were alone. We were wrong. The display focused on one of the largest science vessels. A stream of data flowed from it, translated into a form the conclave could understand. It was a signal, an echo, faint and unimaginably ancient, that had traveled across millions of light-years of empty space from a neighboring galactic cluster. "We call it the Arecibo lullaby," Rostova said softly. "It is not a message of greeting. It is a scream that has been stretched and distorted by time and distance. We have spent decades deciphering it, using every quantum computer in the Confederacy. We have only managed to translate a few fragments, but they are unambiguous." The signal was played. It was not a sound, but a wave of pure information, a cascade of mathematical concepts and raw emotional data that flooded the minds of everyone in the conclave. It spoke of a civilization that had reached a level of technological and philosophical sophistication that made the lumens seem like children. It spoke of wonders beyond imagination, of megastructures that harnessed the power of black holes, of a consciousness that spanned 1,000 star systems. And then it spoke of an end. The final fragments were chillingly clear. It comes from the dark. It does not speak. It does not reason. It does not stop. It is the silence between the stars. The great filter is not a barrier to be overcome. It is a predator. The message ended. The silence that followed was deeper and more terrifying than any before it. The petty squabbles over trade routes and territory, the pride of empires, the fear of economic collapse, it all evaporated, reduced to utter insignificance in the face of this new cosmic dread. "The signal cut out 30 million years ago," Rostova stated, her face a mask of grim resolve. "We have pointed our arrays at its galaxy of origin. There is nothing. No radio signals, no energy signatures, just the cold, dead light of stars. A galaxy of 1 trillion suns, utterly and completely silent." She let the implication hang in the void. A predator. A force, an entity, a phenomenon that had consumed an entire galaxy and had been moving through the intergalactic dark ever since. "This," Rostova said, gesturing to the silent, outward-facing fleet, "is the main human fleet. It is not here to conquer you. It is here to defend us all. For the past 50 years, humanity has not been preparing for a war with the Cathar or the Compact. We have been preparing for a war against the dark." High Lord Valerius stood as if turned to stone, his 4 arms hanging uselessly at his sides. The arrogance, the fury, the pride, it had all been stripped away, leaving behind a raw, primal fear he had not felt since he was a hatchling. He looked at the human fleet, at the science vessels, the factory ships, the colossal, silent warships, and he finally understood. He had been preparing to fight a battle. The humans were preparing to fight extinction. "The Weaver Net," he whispered, the words barely audible in the cavernous hall. "The chaos, it was to prepare us." "It was to make us stronger," Rostova corrected him. "Your centralized empires were brittle, Valerius. A single decapitation strike against your leadership, a disruption of your core logistical hubs, and you would have collapsed. The galaxy needed to be resilient. It needed to be decentralized, interconnected, and adaptable. It needed to be able to survive and fight even if entire sectors went dark. We did not have time for diplomacy, for centuries of gentle persuasion. The threat is not 1,000 years away. It is not even 100. Based on the signal's trajectory and redshift, it is already entering the outer halo of our own galaxy." The revelation was a physical blow. The predator was here, now. "We broke your chains so that you could learn to stand on your own." Rostova's voice was hard but not cruel. It was the voice of a leader who had been forced to make impossible choices. "We needed you to stop fighting each other over scraps of territory and start thinking as a single galactic entity. We needed you to evolve. The chaos you see is not the end of your civilization. It is the painful, violent birth of a new one that might actually have a chance to survive what is coming." Elder Kalis pulsed with a brilliant, sorrowful white light. The patterns it had been unable to see were now blindingly clear. The humans were not conquerors. They were guardians. They had taken on the terrible burden of this knowledge alone for decades, and had made the cold, logical, and ethically agonizing decision to force the rest of the galaxy to prepare, even if it meant being seen as villains. Their logic was flawless. Their ethics, while brutal in their application, were aimed at the ultimate good, the preservation of all sentient life. "Why did you not tell us?" Kalis chimed, its voice filled with the weight of millions of years of accumulated wisdom, now humbled. Why bear this burden alone? Would you have believed us? Rostova asked, her gaze sweeping across the stunned faces in the conclave. 50 years ago, we were a young race you barely tolerated. If we had come to you with this story, you would have dismissed it as a fantasy, a scare tactic to gain influence. High Lord Valerius would have called it a dishonorable trick. The Scythians would have calculated the low probability and ignored it. You Elder Kalis might have listened, but you would have counseled patience and observation, and we do not have time for either. We knew you would not act until the foundations of your own power were shaken, so we shook them. She was right. Every single representative in that chamber knew, with a certainty that was as cold and hard as the void itself, that she was right. They would not have listened. Their pride, their traditions, their ancient rivalries would have blinded them. Now, Ambassador Rostova said, her voice softening, losing its hard, clinical edge and taking on a tone of profound, weary invitation. Now you have seen, now you know the stakes. The human fleet cannot stand against the silence alone. We have built the ships. We have deciphered the warning. But we are one species. We need you. We need the Cathar's courage and your millennia of combat experience. We need the Scythians' logistical genius to supply a war on a scale you cannot imagine. We need the Lumens' wisdom to find a weakness in an enemy we do not understand. We need all of you. The hologram behind her shifted one last time. It showed the deck of her ship where other figures were now emerging from the soft, gray light. They were Cathar, their armor a different design but their posture proud. They were Scythians, their carapaces gleaming. There were Lumen, their crystalline forms glowing softly, and a dozen other species, some that were members of the Compact, others that were not. These are the first, Rostova said. Individuals and groups from your own worlds who embraced the WeaverNet, who looked beyond their old allegiances and saw the truth of what we were doing. They are already working with us. They are part of the greater fleet. We did not come here to demand your surrender. We came here to ask for your alliance. The Galactic Compact is dead. It was a relic of a more naive age. It is time to build something new. A galactic union. One forged not for control, but for a common defense against the Great Dark. The great chamber of the conclave was silent. The weight of galactic politics, of empires and ambitions, had been lifted, replaced by a much heavier, much more fundamental weight, the weight of existence itself. High Lord Valerius looked at the Cathar standing beside the human ambassador. He saw in their stance not subservience, but a new kind of honor. An honor found not in conquest, but in standing on the precipice of annihilation and refusing to yield. He looked at the human fleet, facing the endless night, a tiny bastion of light and life against an encroaching, silent oblivion. His own fleets, which he had thought the most powerful in the galaxy, now seemed like children's toys. His empire, which he had fought to preserve, was a sandcastle on the edge of a rising, cosmic tide. He slowly, deliberately uncrossed his arms. It was a gesture of cultural significance for the Cathar, an admission of a flawed premise, an opening for a new path. He walked to the center of the chamber, his steps no longer the arrogant clang of a conqueror, but the measured tread of a soldier facing his true enemy for the first time. He stood before the hologram of Eva Rostova, a human who had single-handedly brought his empire to its knees without a single act of violence, and he lowered his head in a gesture of profound respect. The Cathar Imperium is no more, he said, his voice raw but clear and strong. But the Cathar people still endure, and we have never shied away from an honorable fight. He looked up, his multifaceted eyes meeting hers, and for the first time there was no animosity between them, only a shared, terrible purpose. Tell us what you need. The warriors of Cathar will be your sword. One by one, the other representatives rose. The Scythian ambassador chittered a formal pledge of all their hive's resources. Elder Kalis pulsed a brilliant, resolute gold, offering the full analytical and psionic might of the Lumen. A chorus of voices, a symphony of 100 different species, filled the hall, not with debate or fear, but with a unified, grim resolve. Aboard her ship, Eva Rostova watched them, her calm facade finally breaking into a faint, weary smile. The first, most difficult part of the plan was over. The galaxy, shattered and reborn, was finally beginning to unite. The real war was about to begin. The holographic display behind her reverted to the view of the human fleet, a silent, lonely vanguard holding the line at the edge of everything. It was no longer just the human fleet. It was the beginning of the galactic fleet. And it was waiting for the silence to break,